What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today I am joined yet again for a draft podcast with my fellow draft mate, Kenneth Grunfelder.
How's it going, everybody? Good to be back as always.
So, if you guys remembered the last couple of episodes we did with him, we went over a wide range of draft prospects. We did our NFL mock draft, going over again a lot of different players that could go in the first round. We made our picks for all the first round. We also did a receiver episode, going over the top 5 receivers. But today we're going in depth with an NFL draft prospect that could possibly go in the first round that I definitely believe is a first round quarterback that I am higher on than most. But like I said, we went over the first round of the NFL mock draft. We did not have him in our first round because again, he wasn't getting as much hype, I feel like, as he got after that mock draft episode. We are talking about Ty Simpson. Now, I think Ty Simpson, for one, is very fortunate of how this NFL draft is kind of foregoing. I feel like there is very limited quarterback options on the quarterback market that we are also going to discuss. But I also feel like he's fortunate because we have seen a guy in the recent weeks in Trinidad Chambliss who, again, was kind of fighting for him for that second spot. I always believe Ty Simpson had the second spot covered. But again, another guy that was an option for some of these quarterback needy teams. Now it's looking more likely than not that he's going to play another full year in college football. So between the very limited options on the quarterback market and then again, a guy in the top 3 for this NFL draft class possibly playing another year in college football, it just all the more makes teams need Ty Simpson even more. Now, when we talk about Ty Simpson, I do believe Ty Simpson is the best quarterback in this draft. I know that's a shocker to some. I know I received hate from that again on some of my short form videos. But I do believe Ty Simpson is the best quarterback in this draft. And I do believe why a lot of people are straying off Ty Simpson is one, because the guy was injured this year. And then also, I do believe Alabama was not the best situation for him, which does sound crazy. We know Alabama is the premier college football program. But at the same time, again, we talked about it, the playing field is evened out way more than ever in college football. And I do think that Alabama had the worst run game in the SEC. They cannot get anything going with their run game. And I do think their offensive line was very inconsistent. Now, we saw stretches in college football where Ty Simpson was arguably the best quarterback in college football. But again, it came in stretches. There were, again, a 6-week period where he struggled. There was a 6-week period where he was very good. But I do think Ty Simpson shows more mobility than most people think. I do think Ty Simpson, again, he scrambles out of the pocket looking to throw more, but he does have some rushing upside. He can run when he needs to, and I do think Ty Simpson throws with the most anticipation out of anybody in this entire draft class. I do feel like this is the one guy that truly throws guys open. So again, I definitely do believe he is a first-round quarterback, but I do think, again, like I said, with how Alabama's season went, with how his season went, I don't think it was the best scenario for him possible. And then the toughest thing with Ty Simpson that I think we've talked about off pod is, and it's a very similar thing with Fernando Mendoza, and it's just going to be a similar thing with how college football is trending. I feel like the limited time you are available to see a quarterback way different than other years. I feel like in other years with a lot of prospects we did like, whether it's a Caleb Williams, Drake May, Justin Herbert, like again, just going back years and years, you're seeing guys in the same system for 3 years. Now with the transfer portal, now with more people staying than ever, you're only fortunate a lot of times to see these quarterbacks for 1 year in their current system. Ty Simpson is a guy that was injury plagued this year, but not only that, he only played for Alabama for 1 year. So again, you got to start making opinions on guys in week 5 and week 6 on if you think they're going to be a good NFL quarterback. And again, we only saw Ty Simpson for 1 year. We only saw Fernando Mendoza for, again, a year in Indiana system. So again, you're seeing guys for only 1 year. It's a much smaller sample size. But like I said, we're going to talk about Ty Simpson and the draft destination that he could possibly go to. Now, again, for you, Ken, do you believe Ty Simpson is a guy that's going to be prompt up to the first round because of teams that need quarterbacks? Do you think one team is going to say, hey, I believe in this guy enough to take him with a first round pick? Very similar to like Jackson Dart last year, I thought, where Jackson Dart was like second round for a majority of months. He ends up going to the Giants in the first round. Or do you believe Ty Simpson is going to fall out of the first round?
I think right now you could see a scenario where similar to what the Giants did last year, you have a team that trades back into the first round and takes him. So I'm of the mindset if he does get taken in the first round, it's going to be a late first rounder. I know we were talking about it, the teams, and we'll get into it more. The teams that could be potential suitors. I know the Steelers, they got the 21st pick. I'm of the mindset the Steelers aren't going to take a quarterback with that pick. I keep seeing that Omar Khan and the Steelers, they really like Will Howard and Aaron Rodgers potentially coming back for another year. So I don't think a quarterback is going to be their selection at 21. The Rams, I think that could be a potential suitor, or maybe they wait and take a quarterback in the later rounds, or if they want to, if he's available at that pick and they like him. I think Sean McVay supposedly does like Ty Simpson a lot, so maybe from something that I was reading, so maybe that could be a potential destination. That would probably be that would be a great spot for him. I think if he ends up in a situation where he sits for a few years or a couple years or so, I think that's probably the best for him. As for him, he's kind of a guy that he doesn't have a big arm. Kind of struggles, is inconsistent at times when dealing with pressure. Things like that. So obviously, you don't want to just throw him into the fire right away. Like I said, with the arm talent, maybe he's not a guy that's projected to be taken, early in the first round. I know, teams like the Dolphins that are picking in the mid first round. We'll see what they do at quarterback, but yeah, for me, I think he is a guy that's projected to be taken, later in the first round or, somewhere after that, and be a guy that kind of sits first and doesn't start right away is how I see this player.
All right, so we're going to go into the 6 destinations in depth that he could possibly go to. We're going to talk about kind of like how you already dived into the pick slotted for some of these teams. We're going to talk about what they can also do in the quarterback market. Now, obviously, the two biggest guys in the quarterback market that are available, I guess we could say three. We talked about already how we do not feel like Daniel Jones is probably going to go anywhere else but the Colts. Daniel Jones was a guy that showed in the first half of the season that the Colts could be a top end team with him starting. I feel like the Colts saw their offense with him already be so successful, and we kind of feel like that's a match that's pretty given that he's going to go to the Colts. So we're just going to take him kind of off the list. The 2 or 3 quarterbacks that are really available that are going off of redemption stories, obviously most popular, Malik Willis. And then you also have Kyler Murray in the mix, and you have Tua Tagovailoa in the mix. Now, from Malik Willis and Tua Tagovailoa, I do believe from Malik Willis and Kyler Murray, I do believe those guys are most definitely going to be on different teams this season. Tua Tagovailoa, we talked about. That gets a little tricky just because of his contract. Like, again, if the Dolphins were to let him go, they have to eat a sum of like $89 million. So it's very hard to move off a guy like that. But then again, also at the same time, a lot of people kind of believe for the Dolphins, for Tua Tagovailoa, once they pulled him for Quinn Ewers, like his time is up there. So it's going to be very interesting what's going to happen with that scenario. But again, it's not a layup as much kind of as the other two. I do feel like Kyler Murray has, even though he has a bigger contract, he does have a lot more demand than Tua Tagovailoa, and the team could definitely eat up some of that contract to have him start. And again, maybe he's willing to pay a Kyler Murray between $15 to $30 million, whereas Tua Tagovailoa, he just doesn't have that type of demand right now. And then also for Malik Willis, we talked about this off the podcast. I feel like Malik Willis is a very interesting scenario. The thing that I talked about to you that I feel like a lot of people don't get, when Malik Willis came out of Liberty, this guy was ultra talented. Again, he was arguably the best runner in college football at the time, and he has a rocket of an arm still to this day. But when Malik Willis got drafted to Tennessee, he was looked at as a project quarterback, and a quarterback that was going to take at least 3 years to develop before he even becomes a starter. What I don't understand what Tennessee did, they moved off of him before they even selected Cam Ward a year before that. And for a guy that you drafted that we all knew was going to be a project, you didn't let the project play out. So I don't understand that. And now the project is playing out, and now he's a very highly demanded quarterback because we see what he could do for the Green Bay Packers. But again, I feel like Malik Willis, you could touch on this. If he's a guy that gets $15 to $25 million, I don't mind that because, again, for quarterback money in the NFL, that's not necessarily a huge commitment. But for Malik Willis, a guy that's a running quarterback for the most part, again, he definitely expanded miles in the NFL on how he could throw the football. He did look good. His feet looks, again, a lot more calm than it once did. But for a guy that only has 6 starts, and again, he's projected to get $30 to $40 million, do you feel like that's a stretch and he's kind of just getting propped up in this quarterback market? Again, very similar, like we said, with Ty Simpson, because there's not much there right now.
Yeah, I mean, when he took over for a little bit, back when I guess when Tannehill was still around, he really wasn't asked to do much. I mean, he was basically just handing it off to Derrick Henry and a lot of short passes, not really doing anything. But the times that Jordan Love has been out with injury, he looks like a different guy. The problem is, like you said, it's a 6-game sample size. What happens now if you let this guy start for an entire season? How is that going to look? And I know we were also talking about how there's, once people get more tape on him and see what he's really all about, then, things start to change a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I like I said, you've seen a different guy, stepping in for Jordan Love. Again, still not asked to do too much, but I think he definitely was asked to do a little bit more as opposed to Tennessee. But I guess because now he's, into the league more and in a better system with Matt LaFleur, it's worked. And, he's come in and, there were games that, the Bears game when Jordan Love with the concussion, I mean, Green Bay was in position to win that game. Like, he did his job. And then, the Packers collapsed and then they ended up losing in overtime. And then the Ravens game, the Packers defense just couldn't stop anything. They couldn't stop Derrick Henry, oddly enough, his former teammate, Malik Willis. They couldn't stop him, but Malik Willis played well in that game too. But yeah, if you're talking about giving a guy like him $30 to $40 million, I mean, you must be really desperate to bring in a guy like him to your program and to try to stabilize your quarterback position. And again, maybe he goes out there and he gets his contract and he plays really well. But I don't think he's a guy that should be paid that kind of money. I think for him, he's a guy that, he could be that bridge quarterback. You have if you end up taking a quarterback and you have Malik Willis start and then you hand it off to the young quarterback, you do that. But if you're paying him $30 to $40 million, I mean, your expectation is this guy is going to be our starting quarterback. And for me, I'm not ready to say that. I like the role that he has with the Packers, being the backup, but that obviously, like, if he's able to get that kind of money on the open market and be a starter, then, he obviously can go and do that. But I think for him, his role in the NFL to me is, to be a backup quarterback that can come in, win you some games if your starter does go down, and maybe be a guy that, starts for your team and you have a young guy sitting behind him waiting in the wings to come in and take over.
Yeah, the problem is too with Malik Willis is, I get what you're saying. If you have a young guy behind him or whatever, not only is he going to get paid significant money, he is also like pretty young as well. So I feel like a team is also kind of looking for him if they're going to sign him, especially for decent money, as part of their future. Again, like you said, and like I alluded to too. Like, again, the thing that pisses me off with this whole Malik Willis situation is that the guy was looked at as a project, and the team that drafted him didn't let the project play out, and now it's going to play out for another team. But at the same time, like I said, I do think Malik Willis does have all the tools to be a successful NFL starting quarterback. But my thing is, again, it's like, are we going to do this prematurely and give him this money that, again, he hasn't really shown that he deserved by any means yet, just based on the sample size that's out there? And again, the sample size is a huge issue because we see a lot of guys that are mobile quarterbacks that succeed very early, but once a team has a certain tape on them, it gets a lot harder for them. Again, and we also, like I said, we alluded to Kyler Murray as well. I do think Kyler Murray is most likely a starting quarterback in this league. He, again, is definitely one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. And again, why Malik Willis is prompted higher than Kyler Murray, I think it's just because we've seen such a huge sample size of Kyler Murray, and teams feel like you may not be able to win with somebody that is his stature. But I also feel like Kyler Murray, again, showed a larger stretch of really good football than Malik Willis has ever shown. So that makes it interesting as well. I just think a lot of people see the ceiling with Kyler Murray because we've seen so much of him. All right, now we're going to get into the 6 teams for Ty Simpson, where Ty Simpson can possibly go to. Now, coming in at number 6, which I think is probably the least likely destination, just because of where this team is at in draft capital. And again, they do have 2 quarterbacks. One that I believe could very well be their starter going into next season is Arizona. Arizona has 3 and 34. I'm not in love with the situation at all. I think Arizona with Mike LaFleur probably got the worst head coaching candidate. Then not only that, I do think the offensive line is pretty bad. I think the run game is a kind of unknown for them. I do like the pass catchers they have. It's not a horrible situation because you do have a Trey McBride who's one of the best pass catchers in the NFL, along with a Marvin Harrison who was this generational talent a couple of years ago. And then you also have Michael Wilson who stand out as well for the games that he stood out for. But for Arizona, while I just don't believe in it, I just don't think this is the year for them to draft a quarterback because they're not going to draft him at the number 3 slot. We know that is not going to happen because that's just not where Ty Simpson is expected to go. We talked about if Ty Simpson were to go, it's probably in that 20 to 30 range. I do think it could be as high as 16 to the Jets, but it's not going to be with a top 3 pick by any means. He just does not have that type of demand. Teams don't look at him in that way. And then when you look at 34 is their next slot of draft pick, I don't think he's really going to go as low as 34. Is that a possibility? Sure. But again, the Jets are ahead of Arizona at that pick. I do think the only way he does go to the Cardinals if they package 34 and maybe another pick and they slide up into that, 20 to 30 range and then select him. But again, at the same time, with everything going on with Kyler Murray, them going into a new era, I do kind of see them hand it off to Jacoby Brissett or another veteran. I don't really see them going with a young quarterback. And then if they did go with Ty Simpson, this is a guy that's going to be pressured to start right away. Like you said, there's probably no expectation where he's going to sit a whole full year, whether they had a veteran quarterback in front of him to give it them to the second half. But again, this organization right now is going to be way too impatient for a Ty Simpson to sit a whole full year.
Yeah, and I think when Jacoby Brissett stepped in, I think we talked about it on one of the previous pods. Like I did think he played well. It's just the Cardinals really didn't win any games with him starting. And if they're moving off of Kyler Murray, you go forward with Jacoby Brissett as the veteran quarterback, and then you see what your options are behind him. And yeah, the Cardinals offensively, pass catchers, not bad. And obviously you went over that. Trey McBride, very good tight end. We saw Michael Wilson really break out this past season. Marvin Harrison, not the best year in year 2. Hopefully, maybe year 3 could be the year that, he really steps up. The running game was kind of a disaster last year, obviously with James Conner going down early and, Trey Benson getting hurt. Like you mentioned, the offensive line is not very good. Yeah, they're a team that has a ton of holes, got a lot of work to do. And on top of that, they play in a really tough division.
So now we're going to get into the Rams. They pick at 13 and 29. We have discussed this multiple times with the Rams. We feel like every year for the last at least 2 years, the Rams have been rumored to draft a quarterback, and it just never happens. Obviously, again, this would be a premier situation. Ty Simpson behind Matt Stafford would be phenomenal because Ty Simpson, like you said, is a pocket passer. And like I said, he throws with anticipation. All things Stafford does. Stafford would be a phenomenal guy to learn behind because he's most likely a Hall of Fame quarterback, a guy that just won an MVP last year, and a guy that you could learn from, but is also playing really good football right now. And then after that, you go into the best possible situation you could ever dream of. You have an offensive play call like Sean McVay, who people think is the best coach in the NFL, and you'll have good weapons around you, and you'll start eventually for a winning team. So this would be a dream scenario, not only for Ty Simpson, but again, for the quarterbacks previously in the last 2 years. And then again, if he doesn't get drafted and he don't select a quarterback next year, this is a dream scenario for any quarterback. But again, like we also alluded to before this podcast started, the Rams, if they want to wait till the day Matthew Stafford retires, the fortunate thing for them is with a head coach like Sean McVay and the roster that they do have, they're going to be a premier destination for any quarterback. If there's free agent quarterbacks they want to go to instead of drafting a quarterback, they're going to be the top destination always when they need a quarterback pretty much because of just the infrastructure they have on this team. Now, for the Rams, they're picking at 13 and 29. I do think 13 would be a little early for Ty Simpson. I do think they're going to make that pick. And then 29, That's where it gets kind of interesting because, like we said, 20 to 30, we feel like is the sweet spot for Ty Simpson. So I think they could definitely take him there. I mean, they're going to take a premier player at 13, and then you have the range where you could definitely pick a quarterback. I feel like for the Rams, it's just going to be one, is this the year that they actually do what everybody thinks they're going to do? And then also at the same time, 29, it can be a little late because, again, you could see a team maybe a little bit earlier take a Ty Simpson. So you're kind of in that spot where if you do really like Ty Simpson, either one, you trade up slightly, 2, 3 picks, or you just sit there and wait and hope that he's there. But like I said, for the Rams and Ty Simpson, this would be a dream destination for Ty Simpson. Like I said, for the quarterback that he could possibly be behind and learn from, and then the infrastructure that this Rams team has. Like he's going to go to a team that's going to be a contender, and he has the availability to sit and be ready to start for them. It would be a phenomenal destination. But again, I do think the Rams have the infrastructure to make the pick. It's just with 29, it does get a little weird. It's kind of in that sweet spot, but it also could be a little late.
Yeah, and they're not really a team that has a ton of holes. Obviously, special teams played them last year. The secondary was not very good, really. In the playoffs, they were really bad. There's just not a lot of weaknesses on this team that they have to address. And based off of how Matthew Stafford played last year and winning his first MVP, he's not slowing down right now. Now, there's some injury concerns with Stafford. Obviously, had the injury concerns right with the back before the year started, and it was like, is he even going to be ready to like play this season? And he did, and he played really well. Like I said, won the MVP. So, yeah, I don't think there's like that urgency, like, hey, we have to take a quarterback, this season, because Stafford is going to come back, and if he stays healthy and he plays like how he did this year, he could play into his 40s, like we've seen with quarterbacks lately now. So this would be a great spot for him. You learn from a veteran quarterback that, is playing really well right now and has won a Super Bowl, and has had this renaissance career now with the Rams, after spending all those years in Detroit and not really, getting over that hump and, having never won a playoff game. You go on and you have a Super Bowl run, you win the Super Bowl first year with the Rams. So, and then on top of that, you got Sean McVay. And it's just kind of funny how people kind of scratch their heads when McVay like first got hired. Like, what is this guy going to do? And all he's done since he's become the head coach of the Rams is win games. And this team has been in the playoffs pretty much every season that he's been the head coach, and is looked at as one of the best play callers in the NFL, like you were saying. So yeah, this would be a great spot. Really, even if it isn't Ty Simpson, if it's a young quarterback that they take, whoever it may be, if they end up doing that, whether it's this year, whether it's next year, wherever, it's going to be a great spot because you're not going to be starting right away. You're gonna develop. You're gonna sit behind a veteran quarterback. You got a team that's loaded, a pretty good defensive line, good skill position players with Puka Nacua and the two running backs that they have in Kyron Williams and Blake Corum. It's a great spot. So, like I said, whether it's Ty Simpson, it's another young quarterback. That's a great spot. It's going to happen at some point. I feel like the Rams are going to take a young quarterback, but it's we'll have to see where and when that ends up happening.
Yeah, again, this, like I said, this would be a dream scenario. Ty Simpson, a pocket passer, a guy that throws in anticipation, to learn behind a future Hall of Famer like Matt Stafford, and then also have the ability to sit and be ready and get into a good situation. Again, there's no better destination for him or any young quarterback on this list to go to, but it's just if the Rams ever pull the trigger on a young quarterback. Now we get into number 4, the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins do get a little interesting. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins are the biggest suitor right now for Malik Willis. Like you mentioned to me before the pod, they do have the ties to the Green Bay Packers with Jeff Hafley. It's also very interesting because they do have an offensive coordinator from Shanahan's system. So again, with him, Matt LaFleur, it wouldn't be that drastic of an offensive change, even though, every coordinator puts their own DNA on play calling. But again, it would be an easy transition because of the whole coaching staff in Miami. The only thing that's very interesting to me with Malik Willis and the Dolphins is you're going to have to eat up so much money with Tua Tagovailoa. And if Malik Willis does command the money that we think he can command between $30 to $40 million range, I don't know how Miami could possibly do this. If they do it, it's just going to put them in a hole money-wise to really, again, really spend on the rest of this roster, because if you're eating up $89 million with Tua Tagovailoa, and then you're also signing another quarterback for legit quarterback money, how much money do you have to really make this team great? I also don't think the Dolphins are just the best destination in general. I don't think their offensive line is great. I don't really believe in Jeff Hafley much at all. But for them drafting Ty Simpson, I do think it's a possibility because, like I mentioned with the Malik Willis thing, I don't know how much money they're going to have to spend on a quarterback. So again, if they were able to draft a quarterback, that could be a much cheaper option. The only tough thing with Ty Simpson, now we're getting into a lot of these places where he's going to have to start right away. I do think he would have to start pretty much right away for the Dolphins. Again, if they wanted to go with Quinn Ewers, or if they signed the veteran quarterback for half a year, maybe, but they're going to get impatient. They're going to want to start him. I don't think it is the worst situation possible because you do have an elite playmaker in Devon Achane, and you also have a really good playmaker in Jalen Waddle. But again, I don't think the offensive line is there. I don't think the whole team is there in general. They're in a pretty tough division. Like I said, I don't believe in Jeff Hafley. Their picks are 11 and 43. I do think 11 may be a little premature for Ty Simpson. I don't think they're going to pull the trigger there. And in 43, it's also tough. I don't know how many picks they have after 43. I don't know if you're going to move up to 20 or 30. I just feel like, again, we mentioned this time and time again. We mentioned this in our mock draft. I do think the Dolphins, for where they are in this draft and what they have, are in one of the worst situations in the NFL. Like I said, I do feel like this team is probably like a bottom 5 team future-wise, and they have pick 11. They don't have much draft capital outside of that. So that gets a little weird with them. What do you think about the Dolphins possibly drafting Ty Simpson and what they could do at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, they gave Quinn Ewers, the last couple of games to kind of prove himself last year, and they're a team, like you said, not a great situation. They're another team, like the Cardinals that, they have, some holes, and I don't think taking Ty Simpson is something that they're going to do, with those 2 picks that you mentioned. So I think they're probably going to address other areas, and yeah, they have Jalen Waddle now. I mean, is it possible that he ends up getting traded this offseason, and they get more assets and just completely rebuild this team, which I think that's, what they're probably going to end up doing. And then obviously, the decision with Tua, what they're going to end up doing there. It is going to be a huge cap hit if they do end up cutting ties. And we did talk about this based off of, what happened last year. Like I said, Quinn Ewers starting over him, Tua being sent to the bench. The relationship's not great there, so it's probably better off that they cut ties and they're going to have to eat the money. So, and I know we talked about it before we started the pod here. Would that make sense just because from the financial standpoint? But yeah, they got a ton of holes. I think especially when you have a young quarterback already on the roster and maybe you want to see what you have in him, you go with Quinn Ewers. So I don't think Ty Simpson's going to end up, one of the destinations we're talking about here is the Dolphins. I don't think it's going to end up being the Dolphins.
Yeah, it is tough. Like, I don't know what the Dolphins could possibly do. I mean, probably their 2 options realistically is they're either going to go for Malik Willis, like we said, because of the connection and take the shot on him, or they're most likely going to eat a year. Like, that's probably like another case scenario,
Yeah.
and then hope they pick Toppin next year and try to rebuild. But like I said, with the infrastructure that they have and the picks that they have, I just feel like they're probably one of the worst situations in the NFL. I mean, I don't really see Ty Simpson going here, but again, you never know. Then we get into the top 3 destinations. This is where I really start seeing Ty Simpson going to. At number 3, we have the New York Jets. Now, New York Jets pick at 16, 33, 44. The Jets have the most draft capital, arguably, in the NFL right now, which, again, they are really bad, but at the same time, they do have the picks. They do make the right selections over the next 2 years, could fully rebuild this team if they hit on a majority of these picks. So, like I said, 16, 33, 44. Now, again, we do live in New York. I like Ty Simpson a lot. I would not mind any means the Jets taking Ty Simpson because, again, we hear the same thing we hear over and over every single year, and I am super high on the quarterbacks going to next year's class. I do think it's going to be a really great class, but you never know. And then, obviously, everybody's going to want that number 1 pick next year for Arch Manning. Now, for the Jets, you could you could, again, sign whatever quarterback you want to sign. You're probably just throwing a year away, and you could take all these other positions. But for me, and you could wait for Arch Manning, you're not going to be guaranteed to get the number 1 pick. And then after Arch Manning, anything after that is so volatile. Like, anything could happen with those type of players, even though I am high on a lot of them. So, again, if you have a quarterback right now that you do really like like I like Ty Simpson. I don't know if I want to sit a year and wait for Arch Manning in a pick that I may never get. So that's the biggest thing for me. I would take Ty Simpson if I'm the Jets. I really would, because I don't know what the Jets are going to do if they don't take Ty Simpson, honestly. I don't know if Fields is going to come back to that team. It kind of feels like they're going to cut ties with him, but you never truly know. You have Tyrod Taylor. I don't know if you're going to continue on with Tyrod Taylor. I heard Tanner McKee, obviously Will Levis. Like, again, these are guys that aren't going to be long-term starters by any means. So, again, the Jets are just most likely, if they don't take Ty Simpson, going to take a gap year. My only issue with Ty Simpson going to the Jets is very similar, like we said, with the Dolphins, and we're going to say with a lot of these teams coming up. If the Jets take Ty Simpson, this is not the best situation, and Ty Simpson is going to start very early for you. That's my only thing with Ty Simpson. And then again, obviously, not in love with the coaching infrastructure at all. But the one thing with the Jets, the offensive line has improved. It is a sufficient offensive line. You have Breece Hall, who I believe is going to come back, because I've been hearing things with either transition tag or franchise tag. So Breece Hall is going to be back. You have Garrett Wilson. I do think you would have to add another playmaker or two in this offense to make him comfortable. But again, it isn't the worst possible destination that you could possibly go to with all the picks that they do have. I do think this is going to be an improved roster. And like I said, if you're a team that really believes in this quarterback, I think, again, to sit and just wait for next year and hope you're the worst team in the NFL and get the number one pick, I think that's, again, not likely of a chance that you're going to be that team with that number one pick. Now, again, 16, 33, 44. The other reason why Ty Simpson, I believe, is very likely to the Jets, because they have all the draft capital to make it happen. Again, 16 would I said possibly be the earliest that he could go, but I don't think 16 is much of a reach for Ty Simpson at all. Then you have 33, 44, along with other first rounders in next year. Like, they do have the ability to trade up if they want to, and then they also have the first pick in the second round as well. So they have a bunch of picks to possibly make this happen. And like I said, they have nothing going for them at the quarterback position. If anything, it's going to look at like to be a gap year. So again, with all those picks, I think Tyson and the Jets could definitely be a possibility, and I would be all for it. Like I said, I really do believe in him. I do believe he is the best quarterback in this draft. And again, like I said, if you had a crystal ball and you said, hey, if you don't take Ty Simpson, you're going to have the number one pick to take Arch Manning, then I would say, hey, pass on it. But again, to go again, what everybody hates to say, this next year's draft quarterback class is going to be better, and then we get to the year and it's not or whatever. Like, if you like somebody, I would take him.
The Jets got put in a tough spot with the number 2 pick, and obviously with what happened when Indiana went up against Oregon, and the performance that Dante Moore had, because there were maybe some connections with Dante Moore, and then obviously he's going back to school, and Mendoza's definitely going to be the number 1 overall pick. And the Jets, like you said, they do have the draft capital. There's a lot to dislike when it comes to the Jets, when it comes to how ownership has handled things, and the coaching staff didn't have a great first year, putting it lightly. And do you trust the coaching staff to be able to develop a young quarterback? I like Tyrod Taylor as a backup. Problem with Tyrod Taylor, even as a backup quarterback, he's another guy that always gets hurt. Justin Fields, based off what happened last year and the comments that the owner made, and it kind of destroyed Justin Fields' confidence even more. Fields is probably not going to be back with the Jets next year. I would imagine that's going to be the case. So then it's, what do you end up doing? Yeah, I think looking at the Jets offense, really, like, obviously the situation is not great when talking about the coaching staff, but like you said, the offensive line, you got your tackles situated on both sides. The interior of the offensive line, I know Vera Tucker is a guy that's been hurt. I believe he's a free agent, so we'll see if they end up bringing him back, whether they do, whether they don't. But you got your position set when it comes to the tackle spots. If they bring back Breece Hall, that's a plus. You got Garrett Wilson. You made a trade. You made a couple of trades last year. You got Adonai Mitchell from the Colts. They also brought in John Mechie as well when they got him from the Eagles. Obviously, they're going to add some. They should add some more pass catchers there. You got Mason Taylor, the young tight end, as well. So there's definitely some things to work with on that side of the ball. Like, where the Jets really need to fix their team, not just with the quarterback position, is with the defense. After they gutted their defense last year, and it really struggled down the stretch there last year. So they're definitely going to address that with the draft coming up. I think the Jets are a team that maybe you still take a young quarterback. whether it's Ty Simpson, whether it's somebody else, like you said, they have the draft capital for it. If they want to move up and try to snag him in the late first round, or if they're able to wait and they can take him early in the second round, you do that. It's going to be all about now. What veteran quarterback are you bringing in to start over him if that's what they end up doing? Are they going to stick with Tyrod? We'll have to see. But yeah, like there are some things to be concerned about when it comes to the Jets. But like I said, I do think there is some kind of a foundation there on offense that they can work with a young quarterback. Like I said, it's really all about now, can the coaching staff help bring a young quarterback along and develop him to be successful?
And again, obviously for Ty Simpson, this isn't the ideal team you want to go to. It isn't a team that, again, many people want to go to. A lot of people speculated, like you said, that Dante Moore went back into college football just because he didn't want to go to that organization. But at the same time, they are probably the most likely organization for Ty Simpson, just solely on the fact, like that you said, they're the most likely organization to draft a quarterback, obviously, other than the Raiders, because you have nothing in that quarterback room right now. And whether it's Ty Simpson or a different quarterback, and whether it's round 1 through 4, the Jets are going to take a quarterback at some point in this draft. So obviously, they're one of the most likely destinations to take him. Now, going off of best destinations and stuff, at number 2, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I feel like what goes on in the next couple of weeks with their quarterback room is going to tell us more if this pick is going to be more likely or not. Really dependent if Rodgers coming back. A lot of people do believe with the coach and hire that Rodgers is going to come back. So again, I think more likely than not, even though it is viable for the Pittsburgh Steelers to draft a quarterback and sit a year behind Aaron Rodgers, which I think is a lot better than if Ty Simpson were to get drafted to them right away and start right away. I think he could be better off sitting a year. So I do think that is a viable option. At the same time, you said they do like Will Howard a lot. I do think, though, if Aaron Rodgers some way does not come back next year, I don't see them starting Will Howard next year. I see Will Howard as a guy minimum has to sit 2 years before he even gets in. I don't think they're going to start whatever he was, a 5th, 6th round quarterback next year, unless, again, he's just breaking through and we all don't see it. But at the same time, Pittsburgh Steelers, again, they probably most likely, if they get Aaron Rodgers back, are going to add somebody to this offense or to this defense, somebody to win now at 21. But I do think it is a pretty solid option. And I do think it's one of the best possible landing spots for Ty Simpson, just organization-wise. We all know Pittsburgh Steelers, top organization in the entirety of this league. Again, I don't think they have the best system they ever had with all the players around them. But again, I think it would be more beneficial than anything if Aaron Rodgers were to come back and Ty Simpson was able to sit a year and then it becomes his team, than him just getting thrown into the fire right away. Because we all know that's most likely what's going to happen if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back. But it gets to the point with the Pittsburgh Steelers, too. If Aaron Rodgers does say he doesn't come back, they're going to need a quarterback. Then they get into, kind of like we said with the Jets, where they're going to draft a quarterback at some point within this draft. So then they become a much more likely situation. I do think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, though. What do you think about this whole destination?
Yeah, so I agree. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back. I mean, the Steelers have had numerous conversations with him. Mike McCarthy's had conversations with him, multiple conversations. Seems like he is going to come back. And, I saw a clip of Omar Khan talking about it. They're going to find out, what his decision is very soon. It's not going to be like it was last year where it was dragged on for months. But yeah, Rodgers is going to come back. They also have Mason Rudolph on the roster. I mean, Mason Rudolph is obviously backup quarterback. Will Howard, late round pick last year. Like I said, they seem to like him a lot. They obviously made a change. Mike McCarthy's now the head coach. I feel like McCarthy does, get a lot of heat. But he did help develop Aaron Rodgers, kind of changed, his throwing motion, and they did have a lot of success together back in the day in Green Bay, and then obviously things got stale. The Steelers, one of the biggest knocks on them is their ability to, find that franchise, or their inability to have found their, franchise quarterback outside. Once Big Ben retired, they went to Kenny Pickett, and that didn't really work out. So they kind of been going through different veteran quarterbacks these last few years. They brought in Trubisky, then they went to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and then, last year was Aaron Rodgers. So they've kind of been desperate on when it comes to the quarterback position. But it looks like it's going to be another year of another veteran. Well, with Aaron Rodgers again, another year with a veteran quarterback, but with Aaron Rodgers now for the second year in a row. But this wouldn't be a bad spot for him because, again, like Mike McCarthy, offensive mind, has worked with Aaron Rodgers, a future Hall of Famer. He spent some years in Dallas with Dak Prescott, and the offense was pretty good. So, I think for a young quarterback, that is a good spot to be with a guy like Mike McCarthy that has, worked with quarterbacks, some future Hall of Famers, obviously. Obviously Rodgers going to be first ballot when he eventually does retire. So yeah, I mean, look, when you're looking at the Steelers offense, I liked the running backs a lot last year. Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. I believe Gainwell is a free agent. We'll see if the Steelers bring him back. But Jalen Warren was pretty good for him last year. I wish they used Pat Freiermuth more. I think Freiermuth is a pretty good tight end. Just really did not get used last year. They were favoring Jonnu Smith, and I didn't really understand that. But Arthur Smith loves Jonnu Smith. Bringing in DK Metcalf and paying him all that money, it wasn't that bad for them. The offensive line it's still kind of a work in progress, but they definitely showed some growth last year, with Rodgers being there. So, the defense is on the older side, so I think you're going to want to add some more youth there. They're definitely going to need another skill position player on the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, not a terrible situation if Rodgers does call it quits. But yeah, if Rodgers does come back, I don't think they're going to be a team that takes a quarterback.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too because even like you said, Pittsburgh has been that team that I feel like, especially for the organization, they have been waiting to draft the first round quarterback again. It was kind of a reach with Kenny Pickett. At the same time, again, like if you don't take a quarterback this year, Aaron Rodgers comes back, he retires. Then next year, again, you're in the spot where you kind of have to take a quarterback, and who knows if the pick is going to allow you to, if there's going to be somebody viable to that pick. So I do think it's a possibility either way. Obviously, like you noted, Joe, I do think it's way more of a possibility if Aaron Rodgers does call it quits this year. Now we're getting to number one, I think is the best possible destination for him, pretty much outside of the Rams, which is kind of a little bit more of a reach. The most possible realistic destination, I think, for him that is the best is the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns have a decent amount of picks. They have number 6, they have number 24, they have number 39. I do think 24 for them is right in that sweet spot, like we said. We said 20 to 30, we could really see him going. 24 is that perfect spot for him where they probably wouldn't have to trade up, and he could be there. There's a great chance, better than not, that he would be there. I think Cleveland Browns are a really good situation. I don't even mind Ty Simpson starting right away for the Cleveland Browns because I don't think the Cleveland Browns, again, we all know the organization is horrible. We all know the ownership is horrible. But where they're at with a team infrastructure-wise, I do think their team is pretty good for a quarterback to jump into, especially a young quarterback. I don't think the pieces necessarily on their offense, and their offense is that far away. I do think they have, again, guys that really came on this year, Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fanning, two guys that I think could be, again, pieces right now, pretty good pieces. Obviously, Quinshon Judkins' season ended earlier than expected. The injury was pretty tough, but I do expect him to still be a viable option. Jerry Jeudy in this offense, I do think he's a good number 2 receiver. The only thing is with this offense, maybe they need another offensive lineman, and obviously they need another playmaker. They have number 6, so I do think that is going to definitely go towards either a playmaker and an offensive line. So again, you're going to shore up that offense a little more. And then the biggest thing is too, why this development can go a little slower is because this team is going to win games with their defense. I do think they have a top unit on defense, top 5 unit. So again, to really not need much on your defense and maybe need a playmaker and offensive line on your offense, they really are not that far away. And then again, even if they were to take Ty Simpson at this pick number 24, you have pick 6 and pick 39 to take a playmaker and an offensive lineman. So again, I believe this team is not far away from being a really good football team. Again, I do think they have a great unit on one whole side of the ball. So again, and I think their offense is not that far away from picking up. And I wouldn't mind a quarterback starting very early for this team because, again, like I said, I don't think their offense is that far away and they can win games with their defense. Now, again, obviously the biggest thing with Cleveland, a lot of people are very high on Shedeur Sanders. Again, I don't think Shedeur Sanders proved that much to really for Cleveland to say, like, hey, we're not looking at any other options. Again, I don't think Shedeur Sanders proved this season he should be the long-term starter at all. I know everybody jokes around with the Pro Bowl stuff and everything, but in actuality, he won 2 games and he didn't really play great in either of those 2 games. So I think Cleveland is definitely going to explore options at quarterback. I heard they're going to explore Malik Willis as well, which again could be viable for them. I could see them doing that. But I don't think they're bad decision at all. I do they have the picks to make it happen. And again, they could definitely go to younger quarterback route too. I don't think Shador Sanders by any means is like guaranteed their long term starter, even guaranteed their starter next year.
Yeah, no, I don't think he earned that right. I think he's definitely going to have to prove it. I mean, his best game came against the Tennessee Titans, who were awful last year. So, and like you said, the two games that they won, Shador really didn't do that well. So he's definitely going to have to earn it. The roster is, the defense is very good. They have some playmakers on offense, some young pieces. Quinshon Junkins before the injury, like we've talked about Cleveland before especially with the draft pod. Harold Fannin, the tight end. They got pieces there, and if they could shore up the offensive line, it's not that bad of a spot, and that's kind of unusual to say when it comes to the Browns because of the history and how they've struggled to really find consistency. I mean, they've had a couple years where, hey, look, they made the playoffs and they finally won a playoff game, and then a couple years ago they had that miracle run with Joe Flacco. So like shows that they, like you said, they do have a roster that is capable of more. It's just they've been a team that has struggled to find that quarterback, and we've seen that picture before with the jersey with all the names of the quarterbacks on the back. Like they're trying to find that guy, and I don't think that guy's on the roster. Ty Simpson, you go there, maybe you become that guy, but we'll have to see. But yeah, the Browns, I'm with you. They're not that far off from competing. It's just they got to find that quarterback and shore up some of the other holes. But the defense still very good. Need some more playmakers, but the main thing is you got to find that young quarterback. You got to find your franchise quarterback, and right now they just don't have it.
Yep, to sum things up pretty much for me, I've said it on this podcast time and time again. I do think Ty Simpson is the best quarterback in this draft. I do think he's a first-round quarterback, and I think he will go in the first round. Like I said, I think his anticipation is next level. I do think he has the ability to extend plays. And then also at the same time with this quarterback market being as dead as ever, like we mentioned throughout this whole entire podcast, I do think that's definitely going to uplift him to the first round or at least increase his chances of that even more. Anything else you have to add about Ty Simpson or the draft?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, again, this is one of those quarterback classes that's not, star-studded, right? We're going to see, at most one, if not two, maybe quarterbacks being taken in the first round because Mendoza is obviously going number one. So it's really going to be, about what these teams feel, if they really feel like they need to take a quarterback with their first pick. We'll have to wait and see. And obviously, with the combine coming up and, things like that, then you're going to see, different mock drafts come out where, you got guys, being moved up and taken in the first round. There's going to be a lot of changes with a lot of people's mock drafts as we move along here. In pro days, obviously, people fall in love with the pro days. Some people do. So it's going to be interesting.
Yep. So, like we said, especially like we said in our mock draft episode as well, and like you just mentioned, things are always changing coming to the draft. The stocks are like so volatile; they move back and forth. So it's going to be interesting to see as we get to the draft, as we get closer, where Ty Simpson is really projected to go. Again, like we mentioned all throughout this podcast, it does come to a supply and demand type of thing. And again, there's a lot of demand for quarterbacks, and there isn't that much supply. So we'll see what happens with Ty Simpson. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays, going in depth on Ty Simpson's draft position, and we are out.